Sonic knock his knuckles.
You know, whenever Sonic frees his animal friends, he never considers the fact that they might prefer the moving tin cans they were in. Who knows, one of them might see the Badnik and say, hey, I bet that looks cool. Why am I saying this? That's because for those animals, Sonic is a jerk because he robs them of that experience. Unfortunately, Dr. Eggman is still there, so we need to take him down. Without taking out a Badnik. If this sounds familiar, it's inspired by Nathaniel Bandy's Mario videos where he has to touch every single coin, so check out those videos, they'll be linked down below. So, that brings me to this question that I have for you. Is it possible to beat Sonic 1 without defeating a Badnik? Let's find out. Before we continue, I need to lay some ground rules. Rule number 1, I cannot defeat a Badnik, well, which is actually a no-brainer. So I need to elaborate on what it means to defeat a Badnik. I cannot make contact with a Badnik to where an animal will be released and where I can earn points. I'll get into the specifics later. Number 2, I am only allowed to fight Dr. Eggman. Since he's not a Badnik, I do need to progress beyond Green Hill Zone Act 3. Rule number 3, if I defeat a Badnik, I must restart the level. I could use a checkpoint, but I want to see if I can do it all in one run. This means I'll be using the game's level select code due to the limited lives. With the rules established, let's begin. We start the game in Green Hill Zone, and in the beginning is your normal run through the game with a few stops for enemies to disappear or to avoid taking unnecessary damage. After that, there will be this incline that ends with a spring. Rather than taking a risk and encountering a buzz bomber, I took the bottom route. After a close encounter with a motobug, I made it through the first loop, the S tunnel, and then upon exiting it, I immediately jumped to avoid more buzz bombers and then make it to knock out a Badnik. Okay, so I kind of rushed myself on this one. So after a reset, I take the same route, avoided the neutrons, and at the end, there it is. Level finished, let's move on. Act 2 is more or less the same thing, but I decided to take the high route. The first true obstacle doesn't appear until the area with the rising and lowering platforms with these spike pits. You have to avoid the buzz bomber projectiles. I managed to pass the first one because the platform was large enough to evade the attack. The second one appears as you are on a moving platform. After screwing up the first time, I made it hoping that I don't land on a spike because I'm playing the 1.0 version. Once you make it past the buzz bomber, it's smooth sailing to the end goal. I tackled Act 3 by sticking to the low route when I made it to the S tunnel. I decided to hold left so that way I don't have the surprise encounter with a Badnik. I'm going for safety on this one. After that is this bed of spikes with a swinging platform over it, and I wanted to take a safer route, so I jumped between the spikes. Brilliant strategy. One more attempt and I make it to Eggman, not before I take an ungodly amount of time to get the invincibility and avoid triggering enemies from spawning. 8 hits later, and Eggman has been defeated onto Marble Zone. If you thought Marble Zone was slow in normal gameplay, waiting on these caterpillars will bore you to death. Thankfully, waiting for the right moment will make them not that annoying, for now. A lot of the stage is just waiting on caterpillars, buzz bombers, and these bat brains. The issue with the bat brains is that they can stop and fly towards Sonic again, so getting them off screen is the best strategy. A little bit of platforming and waiting, and Act 1 is complete. Act 2 is where I hit my first big obstacle. At first, it appeared to be incredibly easy, like Act 1, some platforming, avoid the bat brains, and then this happens. I make it to this little corridor where there are 2 caterpillars. Due to how short this was, jumping over it was not happening at the time. I'll get into that in a bit. Either I was going to defeat the Badnik or take damage by hitting the body of it. My first idea was to wait for both of them to get closer to the end with the spring. Maybe it'll be possible to jump over both of them. Sadly, it wasn't. Sonic's large sprite meant that I would either hit the corner or the Badnik. So then I gave it some time and really tried coming up with a strategy to get around these buggers. Wait, buggers? Okay, fine, it's in the script. Buggers. I resorted to abusing the invincibility frames by intentionally taking damage and running through them. Unfortunately, the caterpillar's body will detach and scatter, even if the body's touched by Sonic and his invincibility frames. Okay, next idea. Take the hit and jump right before I hit the body, and it will lead to defeating the enemy. This is the point where I had to make the choice to define what defeating a Badnik meant. Yeah, remember that rule from earlier in the video? I cannot make contact with a Badnik to where an animal will be released and where I can earn points. This is the reason why I had to make the rule the way it was. Without it, this is a dead end. Okay, so as I was writing this segment of the video, I decided to give it another shot. With the spaces between the caterpillars, I thought of trying a well-timed series of jumps with a running start, and it worked. Damn. And it works! After that is more of the same thing. Even with the section of the spikes and caterpillars, there is sufficient space to get through and finish the level. I'll keep the definition of defeating an enemy in case I need it in the future. On a side note, I played this level enough to actually have a fast route through it and it looked really cool. Act 3 is more like Act 1 where it's just waiting and platforming and 2 mistakes. The enemies aren't a bother, 1 boss later, and we're done here. Honestly, there really isn't much to mention here. Spring Yard Zone, Act 1 starts us off with quite the curveball. There are these 3 crab meats and 2 buzz bombers at the very beginning of the level. The only way to make it through them is to take damage and make sure there's enough room to jump. Surprisingly, I actually did this on my first attempt. After that, there are these 2 springs, and I did my absolute best to not roll so that way I didn't run into anything that was spawning. However, I kind of had to, just so that way I can have enough speed to make it over. Then, the high route is key into running to very little enemies, mostly because the rollers would be a nightmare to deal with. Once you take the high route, it's easy mode. Act 2 is more or less the same. If anything, the spikes, no, not those ones, are a huge help for whenever I need to take damage. I take the high one until these bumpers kind of give me a spring in my step, but then one bad pun later and I come across this spring and completely ignore it. A little further down, I take the high route from then on, and the level is basically over. Another walk in the park. Act 3, and hey, I finally get to do one of these segments because it's actually forced in this level. Then after taking some damage to go onto a platform, which is not necessary by the way, I come across a very familiar setting. It reminds me of the Caterpillars, but so much easier since the crab meats are in their place. After I encountered it and screwed up, I wondered if it was possible to take a higher route, and it would work, but Sonic is not fast enough to completely make it. I'm impatient, so I went back to the tiny area with the crab meats, and I just took the hit, and hey, this thing again! I get to the giant half-pipe? Honestly, I don't know what to call these things, and I should have taken the speed shoes and invincibilities because there's not an enemy in sight until the very end. Eggman fight, and we're done. Labyrinth Zone. Frick. If you thought this was easy mode leading up to this, this is where it ends. These things are Borobots, and they suck. They can jump out of the ground, turn around, and go right back to Sonic, and on top of that, they jump at random times. I'll just say this, patience and luck. Oh, and don't drown, we're still in Labyrinth Zone. This is where abusing the damage invincibility is a must, and I quickly learned how to approach them, but it took some time. After goofing on the shortcut, I went down the main route. Everything looked great until I got to the end, and damn it. A few more tries, and Act 1 is done. Act 2 introduces Orbinauts, the Unidasu version, and they're just as much of a waiting nightmare as the Caterpillars, if not worse. It's interesting to play this and not want to get the invincibility and just steamroll over everything. Again, drowning becomes a more real hazard in this playthrough than any other standard one. More abusing invincibility, and holy crap, that one went through the wall! Platforms on conveyor belts, and the act is over. Act 3. I hate this one so much. Let's get this out of the way. I'm going through the shortcut. Everything goes perfectly fine, until I come across this. These 3 Borobots are annoying enough as it is, but after going into the water, there are 2 more to deal with. This is the most luck-based scenario I've ever had to deal with in this entire run. I thought about the standard route, but that's not happening. Thankfully, there is a shield that is a necessary item to make it through this little portion of the level. And then, oh no, air bubble, air bubble, air bubble! Okay, that was a little close. After that, avoiding the spike ball, and then the final climb out of this labyrinth hell. But they do have Borobots, so I had to be very careful. I thought the water was going to rise and I would be doomed from the start. But no, it will wait. Hold on, I need to get that shield. Okay, let's go. After the infamous Eggman chase, Act 3 is over, and thank goodness I never have to do this again. I'm finally free from this crap. Let's go to Starlight Zone. Honestly, I could summarize Starlight Zone as a cakewalk. Every enemy will do damage if I jump into them immediately. These bombs and Uni versions of the Orbinauts are the only real threat to the zone. The only actual challenge is not getting knocked into a pit. I'd like to say this is where my skills are really put to the test, but no, it's just a standard Sonic 1 run. This is the same pleasant ride through this awesome looking zone with beautiful music to accompany it that it always has been. Even the Orbinaut in Act 3 is nothing when you let the bombs explode off screen. Aside from that, Act 3 is the most fun since I was allowed to go as fast as I can in this one section. Because hitting an enemy won't destroy them, I'll just take the damage. No harm, no foul. After that, you fling some bombs, or yourself, into Dr. Eggman, and, well, I'm a little underwhelmed, but I'm honestly a little relieved. The entire zone had enemies I couldn't destroy immediately. I still love it, so let's move on. Scrap Brain Zone is more of a test of platforming rather than constantly evading enemies. I don't think I encountered 10 Badniks on this entire act. Then again, the high route is the best route. The only tricky enemy placement are these ball hogs that can ruin a run. Unless you take damage immediately and jump in the space between them. But once you do that, Act 1 is finished. Believe it or not, but Act 2 is even easier. I mean, it's still stress-inducing with these things that will crush you, but with Badniks, there were even less. Yeah, the route I took had very little enemy encounters. The high route, once again, is ideal, and I thought I had to get past this ball hog, but no. I can completely avoid it, and Act 2 is done. We're on the home stretch. By the way, Scrap Brain Zone Act 3 is basically Labyrinth Zone Act 4. There, I said it. Once again, I'm taking the shortcut because the amount of level hazards makes this level difficult to play through normally. Imagine trying to take the standard route, which is why I will always take an opportunity to encounter less enemies. I was doing my best to avoid these burrow bots and kept screwing up the jump that might have been the safer route to take, but I still managed. After that, I'm in the last area of the act. Set off the burrow bot so I can get to the air bubble, then get through the spiky cluster, and that's the final obstacle. I finally made it! At last, the deed is done and I can finally have my bout with Dr. Egg! Crap. Let's do that again. Now I can have the final bout. And it's at this point that even if I don't fight Dr. Eggman, the run is over. Is it possible to beat Sonic 1 without defeating a Badnik? The answer is yes! Going through this whole thing was not as brutally difficult as I was expecting, for the most part. It's mostly a time-consuming effort, but with some critical thinking, even the most difficult challenges can be figured out. It takes the action-filled platformer and almost makes it kind of a puzzle, requiring more thought than just a run-in and good luck, and it also requires a lot of memorization. So that will do it for this video. Let me know if you want me to do this run for other Sonic games in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, like the video and share it around. If you like the video and you want to see more because you're not subscribed, join the Knux Club by subscribing to the channel and click the bell icon to get notifications for whenever I post new content. At this time, I want to give a shout out to the members of Knux Club Plus, the wonderful people who are helping out this channel even more by becoming a channel member. They are Random Indolent, Kenneth Gutierrez, Mega Trafficone, and Tactical Discord. If you want to join them and become a member of Knux Club Plus, you can do so with the YouTube gaming link down below. The perks for membership, including a shoutout at the end of each video and stream, will be listed below that. Don't forget to follow me on my social media accounts, which are linked below. And with that said, I hope you have a wonderful and safe day, and I will catch you for the next video. Take care.